Hey creeps, Cameron here. We're going to be talking about what I've been reading while I've been in hell. And by hell, I mean these last couple months have been awful. And I don't typically read a lot when I'm in a bad place. I tend to do most of my reading when I'm happy, because when I'm sad or depressed, I just can't focus on reading. But lately, I don't know what it is. I've just been like diving into books so deeply, and it's been my escapism, and for the first time in my life I kind of know what that's like now. So we're going to be talking about all the books I've been reading. It's quite a bit, but first I wanted to thank everybody for your really kind comments and your kind messages to me. Some of you probably saw on my Instagram that my sister passed away of cancer. This happened on August 31st, so at the end of August I was actually at another funeral when I got the news that my sister's cancer had metastasized and gotten much worse. So I drove all the way to Illinois where my sister lived, and I visited her in the hospital and was there with my family for a few days until eventually she passed away. So with that happening right at the end of August, literally the day before September 1st, which is usually when I start my Halloween celebrations, I just wasn't in the mood to make Halloween related videos, even though that's what my channel's all about. Obviously, I wasn't there. I wasn't ready to make videos. So throughout the month of September and October, I just kind of took it easy. I watched movies. I read a lot of books. I was supposed to help out with Kelsey's Halloween-a-thon. I was going to be a host for that, and I was still technically a host for that, but I didn't really do anything, which I wish I could have, because I was really looking forward to that. I just really didn't have it in me. I was sad, and I really wanted to just celebrate Halloween the way I used to before I had this YouTube channel. My sister loved Halloween too. In fact, when she was in the hospital, she was talking a lot about strobe lights in the yard and decorating for Halloween, which of course to me, as somebody who used to do that with her and make haunted houses in the basement, that really got to me. This is something very, very special that I remember doing with her when we were kids, is decorating for Halloween and doing the haunted houses in the basement, and her scaring the crap out of me. She was a very good scarer, much like how I've become, I feel. So I just needed to take a little bit of time to celebrate Halloween in her honor and just not do the hustle and bustle of trying to make videos and write and do all of this stuff. That doesn't mean that I was completely inactive though. I did work on some things. For instance, I released the 5th anniversary illustrated hardcover edition of Autumncrow, which is available right now. I am just so happy with how this book turned out. I think it's beautiful, and it is exactly the way that I wanted Autumncrow to look when I initially released it 5 years ago. The book has been totally reformatted with the illustrations. The illustrations look beautiful, and while the book didn't really sell quite as well as I had initially hoped or expected it to, I still haven't made back my money on it, not even close, but I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. And it's something that I think I can be proud of and look back on and know that I did this, and this is something that I really wanted to do. So thank God for books, because reading has gotten me through this time and has made me feel happy in times when I've been really sad. So let's talk about the books. First, we're going to talk about comic books. Comic books are something that I used to be really, really into as a kid and as a teenager. Kind of got out of them for a while, and now I'm kind of getting back into it again. I tend to read a lot of older comics from the 80s and 90s, or like pre-code comics, Tales from the Crypt and things like that. But I have been getting into the new Universal Monsters comics. These are really, really good, guys. Like, I have the hardcover edition here of Dracula, which just came out, and this is gorgeous. I finished reading this last night, and it's stunning. Like, the artwork in here is just utterly beautiful and gothic and traditional. For instance, the Creature from the Black Lagoon comics here, they're not very traditional. They're very modern comics, but the Dracula comic here is just, man, look at that. I don't know what the art style is. I don't know if these are watercolors, because I'm not an art expert, but gosh, look at that. It's so pretty. So Dracula doesn't really have any speaking lines in this. He says one thing at the very, very end, but mostly his presence is just kind of sprinkled on top of the story. You just see him in the background. You see little traces of him here and there, but he's not like a main player in the story. So this is more from the perspective of Renfield and his kind of redemption arc, and it's really good and very heartfelt and very touching. It's also kind of a scary comic. Like I said, Dracula's presence is just kind of looming over the scenery and over the cast. It makes it a little more ominous and a bit scarier. Let me just tell you, Renfield also looks really, really creepy in this comic. Like, look at him. I loved this, and I highly recommend picking up this gorgeous hardcover edition. And I also read the Creature from the Black Lagoon comics. There's 4 of them. This is also available in a hardcover bind-up edition. So this is a little bit more modern, like I was saying. It takes place in the current day. Instead of having a bunch of scientists on an expedition, we have a detective who is investigating this serial killer, and she has traced him all the way to the Amazon jungle. And she, of course, runs into the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and you find out how the creature ties in with the serial killer. It's really interesting. I would say it's not as good as Dracula. I prefer the Gothic style to the glossier kind of modern style that we have here. But this is also pretty good, so I do recommend picking it up. This cover cracks me up because this looks like Tory spelling on the cover. And then we have issue number 1 of Frankenstein, which just hit comic book stands. This is great so far. So this is going back to the more gothic roots, like the original Dracula comic that I showed you. This is a lot like the original Frankenstein movie, but this is a little bit different in that you're following this kid who is visiting the graveyard. At the beginning of the comic, he's talking to his dad who's dead and buried. And then along comes Victor Frankenstein and Fritz, and the kid hides and they start digging up the body of his dad. And he follows them back to Victor Frankenstein's castle and watches them reanimate his father's corpse. So his dad is back from the dead, but it's not really his dad because it's Frankenstein's monster. It's really good. I have since gone on to read issue 2 and issue 3 of this comic, so there's one more left. I think it's due to come out sometime this month. So excited to see how this wraps up. It is so good, guys. I keep saying it. It's really good. And this 3rd issue made me cry. There's a bit of a twist at the end of this one that I just thought was beautiful, and it's turned this Frankenstein retelling into a bit of a love story. And then EC Comics is back. So we have issue number 1 and issue number 2 of Epitaphs from the Abyss. So this is like Tales from the Crypt. It's bringing back that old style. We have the horror host of this comic, which is the Gravedigger, who is a lot like the Crypt Keeper. I read the first issue last month, and it's okay. I thought it was decent. The second issue, though, was a lot better. It was a little bit more like the original Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, Haunt of Fear, where they do have more of those reflections of real life and politics and all the current day issues. But it's kind of like buried in the story, burned into the story, if you will, to where you can enjoy it just as a story and then pick it apart and find all of the, messages behind it. I have also since gone on to read issue number 3 and issue number 4 of Epitaphs from the Abyss, and these were both fantastic. It just keeps getting better and better and better. It's actually turned into one of my favorite comic books. So they are doing really, really well. Even though the first issue was just okay, the rest have just been absolutely mind-blowing. And like I said, better and better. This 4th issue is my favorite so far, and I cannot wait to read issue number 5, which I do have. Here's the cover art. It's so cool. I love it so much. I'm so excited to dig into this. I'm going to be doing this today. This is today's read. Issue number 4 actually had a story in here called The Perfect Pearl that is haunting and so dark and kind of disturbing and sad. God, I loved it. They are really telling some amazing stories that I think would be really, really great to adapt into that Creepshow TV show that's on Shudder. Like, they really need to look into these stories and think about adapting some of these for that show. And then we have Cruel Universe, which is the special foil edition. So it's going to be very glary. I'm sorry for that. I loved this. So this is the science fiction comic that they're doing. The stories here are wonderful and so classic. There is one at the beginning of this comic. It's kind of like a gladiator situation where these different life forms from other planets are sent to this one planet to kind of fight to the death in these battles. There's a man from Earth. There are other alien life forms. There's a dinosaur, a T-Rex, and you think the story is being narrated from the perspective of the man from Earth. But maybe it's not. There's a little twist at the end, and it's really sweet and very sad. I kind of got a tear to my eye. I've since read issue 2, 3, and 4 of Cruel Universe, and just like Epitaphs from the Abyss, it just keeps getting better and better and better. Before we continue on, let's switch over to a commercial break.
Feeling like Halloween just isn't the same? Tired of your old copy of Autumncrow falling apart after one too many readings? This Halloween season, prepare to be enchanted and terrified. From the library of best-selling author Cameron Chaney comes the brand new illustrated edition of Autumncrow. Perfect for cozying up on those long, spooky nights. This deluxe hardcover is the ultimate companion for your Halloween festivities. Dive deeper into the eerie world of Autumncrow than ever before with haunting illustrations that bring each chilling tale to life. Follow me in, creeps. Don't miss your chance to own this Halloween treat. Order your copy of Autumncrow today before it disappears into the mist. Also available, Autumncrow High Fresh Hell. Read them now, if you dare.
So those are some of the comics I've been reading. I have read some other comics, but I don't want this video to be too long. So we're going to move on to a couple of the books I've been reading. I read Birthday Party Demon. This is the first book in the Totally Freaked series, which is coming out in February of 2025. So this is not available yet. You can pre-order it, but I do recommend pre-ordering if you like point horror or Fear Street, the books I have behind me here. This is like point horror because each of the books in the series are written by different authors. This particular book is about these 3 best friends. One of them is celebrating their sweet 16. They're all invited over for this slumber party, and they decide to do light as a feather, stiff as a board, and then they do a Ouija board, and one of them gets possessed and things get crazy. It's really, really fun, light, bubblegum pop kind of story. It's just really silly, really fun, and nothing to take too seriously. This is a lot like point horror. Another that I recommend is Cruel Nature, 7 Terrifying Tales to Trouble Your Sleep. This is one that's a lot like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. It has super, super creepy illustrations that are a little bit in vein of those Scary Stories illustrations. Look at this one. Oh my God. It's so creepy. So this is a middle grade book, and it's, like I said, supposed to be like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and it is. But I would say these stories are even more gruesome and even scarier than Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which is really saying something because those were some pretty scary stories. Like, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark gave me nightmares as a kid. These, they're a lot like body horror. So if you like body horror, you'll find it here in this book. Lots of very gruesome stories. I think the most gruesome one comes from this story here. Oh, so disgusting. I loved it. This is traditional storytelling. This is more telling the story than it is showing you or putting you in it. So I won't say the writing style here is super strong. It's supposed to be more of just like telling a campfire story. That's the style here. So the writing itself is pretty simple. The real strength here is just the gruesomeness of each and every story. Do check this out. It's available right now. All right, and now we're going to talk about my obsession these last couple of months while I have been in hell and I have needed a distraction. I kind of found my solitude in the least likely place. You would think I would want to read something like Boxcar Children or something really, really light. I have been reading a lot of Nancy Drew lately. We're not going to talk about Nancy Drew in this video because I just did a Nancy Drew video a little while ago. But this is an author that I've always liked, but I've never really like dug very deep into. But I started like digging deep into V.C. Andrews. And I mean deep. I've read like 8 of her books in the last month. So last year, I reread Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. So I read this originally when I was like 12 years old because my sisters read it and they were kind of obsessed with V.C. Andrews and I wanted to see what they were all about. I read this when I was 12 and was like, whoa, this is what they're reading? So this is about the Dollanganger family. They're all blue-eyed and blonde and beautiful. Well, one day the father dies, and the mother's like,
we're broke. We have no money left. We're in debt. Your dad is dead. We need to go back to my family's mansion. They are freaking rich, and they're going to take care of us. But just to let you know, I'm not on good terms with them. They kicked me out of the house. They kind of hate me because of something really wrong that I did as a teenager. If I'm going to get back into their good graces, we're going to have to go back to this house, but you're going to have to, like, stay in the attic and lay low for a little bit because they can't know that you exist. So it's just going to be a couple days. You're going to wait up in the attic. Eventually, I'm going to get back in their good graces. We're going to bring you down. They're going to meet you. They're going to fall in love with you. It's going to be all good, and we're going to be rich, and it's going to be a fairy tale, and it's going to be wonderful.
And the kids are like,
okay.
So they do. They go to the grandparents' house and they get locked up in this attic. And it turns into 3 years. By the end of the book, they are starving, they're sick, they're malnourished. The mother is rich and living her best life. And it's just like,
just lay low for a little bit longer, kids.
And they're like,
actually, we kind of want to kill you because you've kept us locked up for all these years.
It's a crazy, crazy book. There's a lot of child abuse, obviously, and a lot of other really dark things going on here. There are people who read this and they're like, I can't believe anyone would enjoy this, but it's told in such a kind of dramatic soap opera kind of way. It just makes it a little easier to digest, I guess. Because I read this last year and loved it just as much as I did when I was 12, or more so, I decided to go ahead and pick up the second book, which is Petals on the Wind. I had never read this. I'd only ever read Flowers in the Attic. So I didn't know what happened after the attic. So I picked this up like a month and a half ago and I ate this up. This is a little different in that it's a much broader story. So it takes place over many, many, many years. You start off in the story when Kathy is, I think, 15, 16, and the story ends in her late 20s. So by the end of this story, she's a much different person. She's an adult, but this whole book is driven by revenge. She wants to get revenge on her mother. She wants to get revenge on her grandmother, and she does. Spoiler alert, she does, but I will not tell you how. Wow, what a ride. This book is so dramatic and so over the top and just excessive, but in a good way. My mouth dropped open so many times while reading that book. And you can see how happy I am right now talking about it. These books have gotten me through the darkest time in my life, which is crazy because you're reading about the darkest times in these kids' lives. But I don't know. I don't understand. It's so weird. Immediately, I picked up If There Be Thorns. Now, a lot of people say that this is the worst book in the Dollanganger series. You're following Kathy's kids, her 2 boys. So it's told from alternating viewpoints. Kathy is a character in this book. She's their mother, but she's not really telling the story. So I think a lot of people dislike the book for that reason. This is actually my favorite book in the series. It really is. You've got her 2 kids, Jory and Bart. Bart is a psycho. There's something wrong. His narration is just so unhinged. And I just had a laugh the whole time I was reading it. This is great stuff. If There Be Thorns. I don't want to say too much about these sequels because I don't want to spoil things. Then we got Seeds of Yesterday, which is technically the final book in the Dollanganger saga. This is probably my least favorite, unfortunately. I do like the ending. I thought the ending was very sad. It goes back to the gothic roots of Flowers in the Attic at the very end of this book. But the rest of it just felt kind of more like BS drama to me. There are some good twists and turns, and it was a fun time. I read this in like 2 days, and the book is not short. But overall, I just didn't think it was quite as strong as the other books in the series. Lastly, I read Garden of Shadows by V.C. Andrews, which isn't actually written by V.C. Andrews. This came out just after her death. So this is actually written by her ghostwriter, Andrew Niederman, who's also a very accomplished horror author in his own. He's the author of Pen. This is the prequel to Flowers in the Attic, and this follows Olivia, the grandmother. This is another one of my favorite books in the series. This book was so good. Despite not being written by V.C. Andrews, so good. Obviously, you kind of already know what happens in this book if you've read Flowers in the Attic, because this is just kind of, rehashing what you've learned from the other books. But there is a twist here that makes the situation in Flowers in the Attic so much worse. Garden of Shadows, wonderful, 5 stars, loved it. There are more Dollanganger books now that have come out in recent years. I've not read those. I don't know if I will. Actually, I probably will, but I'm very resistant to it. So I recommend just reading those 5. Eventually, maybe I'll read those other ones just out of curiosity, but I'm not too hopeful about them. Next up, I read My Sweet Audrina by V.C. Andrews. This is one that I thought I had read as a kid, but I think I just got it confused with Flowers in the Attic, because this is a very different book than Flowers in the Attic, and nothing about this is anything I remembered reading. So yeah, this was totally new to me. This is really interesting stuff here. So this is about a girl named Audrina, who is the second Audrina. She is the younger sister of the first and best Audrina, who mysteriously died in the woods one day. And then came along the second Audrina, and her whole life has been kind of overshadowed by the first Audrina. Her father makes her sit in the first Audrina's rocking chair in her old bedroom and rock back and forth as a way to try to get the powers of the original Audrina. We don't know what those powers are exactly, but that's what her dad is telling her. She isn't sent to school. She has no idea like how old she is exactly. It's like everybody's hiding time from her and keeping her confused. The house is full of clocks, but the clocks aren't set to the right time, so they're chiming at all these different times. About a quarter of the way through the book, I realized, oh, I think I know what's going on here. Just a very sad and dark twist this book introduces at the end. It's also a lot more adult than Flowers in the Attic. Like, this is a very graphic book. So if you read Flowers in the Attic and you're disturbed by that, maybe avoid this one. This one is quite a bit more graphic. So just a heads up there. I was a little bit surprised by this one. I will say the first half of the book is a lot stronger for me. As it goes on, it becomes a little more dramatic, and it kind of loses the spookiness of the first half of the book, but still very strong book here. And then I read Whitefern by V.C. Andrews, Andrew Niederman. This is the sequel to My Sweet Audrina. My Sweet Audrina was published in 1982, I think, or 1983. This was published in 2016. The writing in My Sweet Audrina is a lot stronger than it is here. A lot more of like a fairy tale, whereas this is, you know, a little more straightforward, but it does feel like it takes place in the same universe, which is something I wasn't really expecting. I just don't think this book was super necessary. Overall, it just felt kind of dull at times, a little bit of a rehash. But there is a character in this book that goes by the name of Arden, and he is in this book, but there's a certain twist that Andrew Niederman puts on his character here that I thought was actually pretty smart, because I picked up on it here in this book. It's kind of implied. That's reflected on a whole lot more here, and I think that was the strength of Whitefern. It wasn't terrible, but it could have been better. Now, before we talk about some of the books that I read for Kelsey's Halloween-a-thon, we're going to switch over to a little commercial break.
Your time is coming, sooner than you think. Or maybe you're already gone, and you just don't know it yet. Maybe that's why you can't imagine growing old. Why you're so disconnected from those who were once so close. Because you're already dead. Because you're fading away. Maybe you were never here. Maybe the world moved on before you ever had a chance. The ghost of a future that will never come to pass.
Welcome back, creeps. So Kelsey's Halloween-a-thon was a really big event in October, just celebrating Halloween, doing activities, reading books, watching movies. I was a host for the event, but like I said, with everything that had happened, I didn't really get to participate the way I wanted to. That being said, I did watch a ton of movies, which I'm not going to talk about right here, but I have been talking about them over on my Patreon, which you can access for as little as $2 a month. I post several casual, unedited videos over there every month, so It's really a very good deal, if I do say so myself. I did read a little stack of books, though, during October, so we're going to talk about those next. We're not going to go into like super deep detail into each of these. I'm just going to mostly show you what I read and give you my general thoughts. Chaos at the Lazy... my God. Chaos at the Lazy Bones Bookshop is not a title that rolls off the tongue very well, by Emmeline Duncan. I was really excited for this one initially when I heard about it. It's a cozy mystery. It takes place in a town where every day is like Halloween, like Autumncrow, for instance, and it takes place in a bookshop. So it has everything that I would want from a book. Sadly, I just could not get into this. I found it to be a little bit dull. It was slow. There was not much focus on the setting, the town in general. I couldn't picture the bookshop in my head. Like, the big part of most cozy mysteries is the setting, and this just didn't really have it for me. The mystery wasn't even that exciting to me, so sadly, I couldn't get into this. I read a Bailey School Kids book called Aliens Don't Carve Jack-o'-lanterns. This is a later book in the Bailey School Kids series, which I loved growing up, but I never read this one. This came out in like 2003. By then, I'd kind of outgrown Bailey School Kids, and of course now I'm becoming a kid again and going back and reading these books. This one, you can tell it comes later in the series because it just doesn't really have the same coziness as those earlier books. But still, I enjoyed it, and I liked how Halloween-y it was. Mystery on October Road and Halloween Echo are both books that are very, very similar. Both of these are about a new neighbor that has moved in next door to the main character. The neighbor is weird, and the kids start planning a prank. Like, that's the plot for both of these books. It was kind of surprising to see how similar they were. This one won an Edgar Award? Yeah, Edgar Allan Poe Award. It's just too short. I couldn't really like connect to it that much just because it was so brief. This one is a little bit longer, and I actually found it to be better written than this one. I would recommend Halloween Echo over this one. I read Creep Over, No Trick-or-Treating. This was my first Creep Over book, and I loved it. This is about a girl who moves into this new town, and everybody here in this town doesn't celebrate Halloween. The kids don't even really know what it is. So she introduces Halloween to her new friends that she's made at school, and they decide to celebrate Halloween together. But this seems to make the townspeople really angry. They are afraid of Halloween, but the girls don't know why until they celebrate Halloween for themselves together in secret. And then you start figuring out what exactly is going on in this town. This got dark. The ending of this book ended in a way that I never would have expected. It's just sad and dark, and I was shocked by it, honestly. Really good. Can't wait to read more Creep Over books. I also read Mimi's Tales of Terror, which is by Junji Ito. I love Junji Ito. I've said this before. I'm not really into manga. It's hard for me to get into them for some reason. I've tried and tried over the years. But Junji Ito is different because he has such a unique style that is a little bit more grounded in reality. His illustrations are just so detailed, and his characters look a little bit less cartoony and a little bit more, like real people. Not to mention, his books are just dark as hell and so creepy and weird. And he just goes for it with the horror. I especially loved this because you've got an anthology kind of book here where each story is its own contained thing, but you're still following the main character of Mimi through each of the stories and all of her weird ghostly encounters that she seems to keep having over and over again. This is equal parts really creepy and scary, but also funny. There's a lot of humor in here and things that made me laugh out loud. Junji Ito, he's the man. I cannot wait to read more of his work. He never fails to amaze me. So those are a selection of books and comics that I have been reading over the last few months. Please tell me what you have been enjoying, what books you've been reading, what movies you've been watching. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who has reached out and said really kind words during this hard time. I truly appreciate it. I appreciate your guys' patience. A big thank you to my patrons who have been so supportive to me over these last couple months. You guys are awesome. I appreciate every single one of you, and I hope the holiday season goes well for all of you who celebrate. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in another video really soon. Bye.